All right, Cowboy fans, welcome here to T-Mobile Center once again. Jace Andrews, Karsten Melton here, and unfortunately the Cowboys fell tonight to the Texas Longhorns. Final score 61-47. And Karsten, it was a very interesting game from start to finish. Defensive battle for sure, but what were some of your key takeaways?
It really felt like nobody could shoot, whether it was Oklahoma State or Texas. Texas held to their lowest scoring output since the game in Stillwater, in which they scored 56 points, and this time 61. Really 58 if you don't count the
Last
last
second
three-pointer at the end of the game. But, it was really a defensive struggle. OSU also just couldn't get a shot off. This was their lowest field goal percentage total of the season at 22%. So really it was just really difficult for Oklahoma State to shoot.
Well, and for the longest time, it felt like Oklahoma State may not get to the 45 mark. They ended up getting past it at 47, but there was a time where they were stuck at 35 for a good 4 minutes and just couldn't hit a shot, couldn't get a foul. Nothing was going right for the Pokes.
Well, they didn't score for the first 6 minutes of the second half, and then it finally ended with a Caleb Boone layup who had a decent second half. But it was really just, it's the story of the season. They really couldn't shoot the ball like they used to. Maybe that's due to not having Avery Anderson, who knows? But just the lack of being able to get good shots up was the killer for OSU.
You mentioned Caleb Boone. Let's get into some key player statistics. Boone finished with a double-double, 11 rebounds, 11 points. Leading the Pokes in scoring was Caleb Asbury, 16 points, 6 of those points coming off free throws, in which I think it was a pretty good game plan, but he got the Texas defenders off their feet when he pump fake for 3 and then proceeded to jump into the foul, which worked in the first half, but not in the second half, which really could have been useful in that second half.
Yeah, I think the officials talked about it, and they're like, hey, he's really exploiting this. Maybe we shouldn't be doing it. There was a really egregious one that they did not call in the second half that, they'd been calling all game essentially, and now that they aren't calling it, you got to be more consistent. Asbury also had those 2 technical foul free throws. Was only one of 2, and then I think was right after that was him jumping into the 3-point shooter. So really, Caleb had a decent game. Just
to be honest, it wasn't a decent game. It was a great second half and
yeah,
a horrible first half. That's really what it was.
Which was pretty much for everybody. Was just
yes, that's true. Well, yeah. Well, the funny thing was Boone, that last 12 minutes really kind of caught fire, and that's where all of them came. Looking on the Texas side, Dylan Dessou, he had a double-double, 11 rebounds, 11 points, but the leading scorer for Jabari Rice, he had 16 points for the Longhorns and really was a key part in the Texas lineup, which had 4 starters in double digits, 5 overall players in double digits in points.
Yeah, it was just they couldn't really stop guys down low. And it wasn't really the 3-point arc that we're standing on right now that was the killer. It was just guys were getting open looks out here and then taking advantage down low when they would try to double, you could see. And Dessou especially was able to get some open looks underneath the basket. So really it was just not – it just kind of fell apart down low a little bit for OSU, but they still had a fairly good defensive game overall.
With the loss, Cowboys now will await their destiny for Sunday's selection show to see if they'll be March Madness bound. A couple of teams to watch out for. Arizona State, they're playing right now. If not right now, the game just finished. They were up when we have the time of recording this. A couple of teams to watch tomorrow. Rutgers, they're taking on Penn State. That's a big game to watch. And then, Purdue, rather. And then you're going to want to watch Clemson as well, as they're right up close to the Cowboys. A lot of teams that you want to keep watch for. And then Utah State, correct, as they're playing right now.
Yeah, Utah State's taking on New Mexico, and Utah State's behind us. That could be a big win for them as they advance to the Mountain West tournament. Clemson takes on Virginia. If they can take down Virginia, get to the ACC finals, that's huge. Even if they lose the ACC finals, they still beat Virginia along the way. That's pretty big. Arizona State, they beat USC. They're going to the Pac-12 semifinals, which that could leap them over Oklahoma State. And then Utah State and the loss of Nevada helped Oklahoma State as well.
That did. That eliminated one team from
exactly.
Contention.
And same with Wisconsin losing to Ohio State yesterday. But now you got to watch out for Utah State. They're a team that could be dangerous to catch up to you as well.
North Carolina's loss today also was huge, but Cowboys are just going to have to wait. Selection show is this Sunday. Be sure to tune in, as we'll see if the Cowboys will be into March Madness or where they'll end up.
Hosting some NIT games.
Correct.
Is the alternative.
Correct. All right, let's get to more into the Big 12 side of things. So 4 games today. Start off this morning session with the Baylor-Iowa State game, in which Iowa State defeated Baylor for the 3rd time this season, which was a trend in this tournament so far. You talk about Oklahoma State beating Oklahoma. That was for a 3rd time this year. You go to this morning, Iowa State beating Baylor. That's the 3rd time this year. Then you go to Kansas beating West Virginia. That's the third time this year. And then Texas beating Oklahoma State. That's the third time this year. So we've had 4 games that are the third time these two foes are facing each other. And each time the team who won the first 2 won the third.
So really what we need to do is look, did Texas sweep TCU? Did KU sweep Iowa
That's
State?
really a thing.
If one's a sweep, that's gonna be whoever they're gonna sweep them. Apparently, is what we're learning.
That's been the trend.
That's what we're learning here in the T-Mobile Center. Going back to the Iowa State Baylor game, it was really interesting. It was really telling how much Iowa State dominated the 3-point line. They were able to get a lot of shots off, and every time it felt like Baylor was getting a little bit of momentum, taking advantage, Iowa State would just come down. It'd be Gabe Kalsher draining a 3 every time.
Well, the biggest thing, Iowa State, Flagler hit a 3 to really shut down Iowa State.
Oh, it was from the logo.
From the logo,
right over there,
right before half. And they came out here and just played absolutely great basketball in the second half to then advance, like you said, to the semifinals tomorrow. They'll take on Kansas. Again, we'll see if that's a rematch, but who won the first 2 is the bigger question.
Right.
So we talked about Oklahoma State and Texas. Then the game that happened just after us. Let's go to that game before we go to for Kansas. TCU, Kansas State. And it was TCU. Without Lampkin Jr., they get the victory tonight.
That was dominant. TCU really, remember, K-State led early in this game. It was a low-scoring game, and then all of a sudden it's like a switch just hit for TCU, and they took off. Very great showing from TCU. A lot of people had a lot of questions, especially after that loss to Oklahoma to end the season. What are they going to do? TCU really just took over this game against K-State and really showed like they could be a team to be reckoned with, much like last year in the NCAA tournament when they took Arizona to the brink.
All right, let's go to the third and final game that we haven't talked about yet, not including Oklahoma State. Kansas defeating West Virginia. I have to say, this was probably one of the more lackluster games of the day, but it's kind of what expected. West Virginia held close with Kansas for the majority of the first half, but second half, it was a Kansas show all time.
Yeah, and you could really tell, like, what West Virginia needed to do to solidify, they already did enough to solidify their case to be in the tournament. But what they wanted to do was play good, play close, play solid against Kansas. They did that. KU, of course, not having Bill Self, who was hospitalized this morning. Of course, we're wishing all of the best to Bill Self, his wife and kids, and his whole family, hoping for a speedy recovery, that he can be back right here along these sidelines as soon as possible. But West Virginia played close to Kansas. Kansas, they played a great game. They did exactly what they needed to do. Now it's just going to come down for KU against Iowa State. It's a really good matchup for both teams. It's going to be an electric basketball game here at what many people call Fog Allen East and Hilton South.
I was about to say, there's a lot of names for this center right now. All right, let's go some quick hits as tomorrow's games. Kansas, Iowa State, who you got?
Man, don't put me on the spot here, Jace.
I said quick hits.
You know,
Quick hits.
I know.
I didn't tell you because I wanted you to not think.
I know. I'm going. I do that a lot, obviously. I'm gonna go KU. I just think they have they're just the better team. I love what Iowa State's doing, but I feel like KU's just got a little too much on the guard side of play to extend themselves a little bit further than Iowa State.
I'm going to take Iowa State because of the fact that each time they don't lose in the first round, they go on to win the tournament.
Hey, I gave you that stat.
So I am going to take that stat from you and use it against you because I think Iowa State not only win then, but they're going to beat TCU or Kansas State. Speaking of that game, TCU or Texas. Who do you got in that one?
I like the Frogs. I think the momentum.
I agree.
I think the momentum is good. I didn't like what I saw tonight from Texas. It really looked like they watched what OSU did shooting poorly. They took like a double team 3, and then Texas was like, "We can do that.
Yeah,
we can try."
That was very interesting.
And so that's pretty much what they did. So
it seemed like they copied Oklahoma State the entire game.
So I didn't like what I saw there. I'm going to go TCU.
I agree. So by our count, we have TCU and Kansas in the final, or TCU and Iowa State. I think I'm going Iowa State as the champion overall. Obviously, we don't know the results of tomorrow's games yet, but that would be my champion as of right now. Would you pick between Kansas and TCU?
I like KU. I just think they're going to play for Bill Self.
Okay, then we can agree on this. Whoever wins the KU-Iowa State game will win the Big 12 tournament. You heard it here first.
But it will be electric regardless.
It will be. It will be. Make sure you tune in. That does it for our coverage here at the T-Mobile Center. Don't worry, we still have a couple of pieces of content coming out for you tomorrow, but given Oklahoma State falls today, we unfortunately will be out of here, but you know, it was a great tournament for Oklahoma State, and I think the best thing is they didn't lose the first game, and so they're not guaranteed to be out. Because we could easily be talking right now, knowing that Oklahoma State will not be in the tournament.
Oh, for
They
sure.
did enough to put themselves in the conversation, and that's what matters.
And that's all they could do.
That's all they could.
I mean, this tournament, they could easily help themselves. Obviously, you beat Texas, you're in. I mean, that
would have been a no-brainer if you beat them.
Right, that's without the question. But the most likely scenario was you had to do enough to put yourself in that conversation. They did that. They got some help from UVA beating UNC. They got some help there. They got some help from Ohio State yesterday beating Wisconsin. They could be getting some help from the Trojans. Who knows? Lincoln Riley's team.
Yeah.
Please, Lincoln Riley School, please. We beg of you. But it's going to be a nervous Sunday, that's for sure.
We'll all have to wait and see, but for now, that does it from the T-Mobile Center for Jace Andrews and Karsten Melton here. The final score again for Oklahoma State, 61-47. Semifinals tomorrow, Kansas, Iowa State, and TCU in Texas. Keep watch as those games, like we said, will be very fun, but signing off of the poker board here in Kansas City once again for Karsten Melton, I'm Jace Andrews. Good night.